Welcome back to Active Ingredients, the leadership series for people who build, scale, and shape the future of life sciences. I'm your host, Tom Dove, founder and CEO of Fraser Dove International, the life sciences talent consultancy. Today's guest is Aditi Singh Ulvskjold. I've tried that. We might need to come back to it another time, but thank you for your patience with my pronunciation there. Aditi is a commercial and transformation leader who's built her career with intention, curiosity, and courage. From global leadership roles across pharma and medtech to founding her own venture and navigating what it really means to start again. Aditi brings a rare blend of ambition, self-awareness, and people-first leadership. She's led through growth, pressure, and reinvention and reset, and she's done it without losing sight of who she is. This isn't a conversation about a linear career. It's about resilience, performance, belief, and learning to lead with clarity when the path isn't obvious. Aditi, welcome to Active Ingredients.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me here. And you did a brilliant job with my last name. It is Ulvskjold, so you were 95% there. So fantastic.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And you and I have met a few times. You know a few people in my business. I'm really excited for today. Always full of energy, these discussions. But I always start the podcast in the same way. Okay. What do you think are the 3 key ingredients of leadership and why?
Thank you for that question. And there's a lot of reflection that goes into thinking about the 3 active ingredients for leadership. And the one that I would place on the absolute top is learning. We acknowledge as leaders, we go through life, we know a lot, we get to learn a lot, but we never know everything about everything. So having an unquenchable thirst for knowledge and what I would like to call being a student for life is very, very important. I am recently starting a new role. It's an area, a therapeutic area I do not know a lot about. And I bring a lot of baggage with me when it comes to how should we think about customers? How should we think about market segments? And I'm trying my best to lean in with that learning mindset to say, how do I take what I've learned from a different area, bring it to another one? There are some good things, some things where we have tasted not so nice outcomes, but how do we make sure that the next role we have, we're able to learn and bring that forward? So that's number 1 for me. The next one, and it is especially true in the times that we are living in, the heydays of healthcare were, before 2019, and then we've seen a lot of sea changes. We've seen a lot of disruption in technology. We've seen a lot of disruption in the industry, whether it comes from drug development, whether it comes from geopolitical situations. The biggest thing that is important is resilience. And when I say resilience, I do not mean to be able to stand tall and stand firm. It's about being able to dance as the tectonic plates move. Resilience also means that you have a clarity of where you want to go and also paint that picture and then stay true to it. I think that also requires a certain level of resilience, a certain level of long-term thinking. And sometimes you have to lead people through it because they may not be having that picture. They may not necessarily understand in that element of journey of change that they're in. So that resilience as a leader, as a person, and as a leader is very, very important. And the last one is humility, in my opinion. And that is something which is very, very understated. And let me unwrap humility, it doesn't mean that you have to be the softest person in the room. It doesn't mean that you have to be the quietest person in the room. Sometimes as a leader, you have to be the quietest person in the room, but it is saying, being kind to yourself and to others is like, I'm only human. And so is everyone else. And having that humility to recognize about yourself, the humility of, yes, we're all in this together and everybody is showing up here to do their best. And sometimes that may not be perfect, but we've got to be humble about where we are and where we're going. I think humility in that sense as a leadership trait, it gives you a lot of empowerment. It gives your people a lot of empowerment. It allows you to have comfortable silences. So for me, these three are very active ingredients of good leadership, coming from where I see leadership.
Yeah, love it. And it's really interesting. I've had lots of different guests on the podcast so far with varied experience. And if you just said maybe like 20, 25 years ago, would these type of, learning resilience and humility be the backbone of leadership? I don't know if that would be the case in that time. So it's I'd say your three active ingredients are very forward thinking and very much of the age now of leadership.
Yeah. And it's also coming from a different aspect. I think every company, every business wants to be ambitious. Every company wants to, when you're a for-profit entity, you want to have a very successful business. At the same time, the context in which and how we can achieve it is changing. The people we work with value different things, and there is some truth to generational differences. We've talked a lot about how millennials function. We talk a lot about how Gen Zs function, how Gen Xs function, and add to it the context of having gone through an epidemic,
Yeah.
having gone through a sea of redundancies, having gone through some crazy drug booms and some layoffs and things like that. If you just look at last year, especially the Danish context and also in the international context. So there are some tensions that we need to start opening dialogue about. Is that what is it essentially that as a leader you want to value and which will make you relevant, not just now, but in the future? And that's learning agility. I need to learn how to deal with different generations working in the same team. And if I'm not humble about it, and if I'm not resilient with where I want to go, that is going to leave people away. It's going to not reflect properly on my leadership. And the beauty is that we always think of ourselves as, oh, we are a completely different professional person and we are a completely different personal person. I have had the gift of having bonus children in the last 5 years. I've always been a dog person. And that experience in the last 5 years has humbled me to no extent, because I've learned how to deal with young people who are probably not going to listen to you because they're teenagers. But at the same time, I am also learning how to deal with a completely different generation. And if you're learning and if you're open as a parent, you'll be very much, and if you take that learning and translate it, in about 5 years' time from now, a significant portion of our workforce is going to be Gen Zs.
Yeah.
A significant portion of our workforce is already millennials. And the Gen X's are not out. So that learning agility is very important. And if you're not humble about it, you can still be ambitious. That is something that is, table stakes from every company these days. So yeah, that's how I see this world evolve.
Yeah, that kind of personal and professional blend. People are being whatever it might be, their true selves in the workplace now, maybe more than they were previously, where there was a bit of a mix up between how leaders thought they had to lead. And actually, you're spot on with you've learned that the humility and the human aspect of leadership is actually what is important now to those people in your team and people around you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this notion of two different personalities. If you have, let's take it from, I'm a medical professional and we can talk about what my journey has been. But if I have a fever, I have a fever as Aditi, the partner, Aditi, the person who's at home. I also have a fever, Aditi, as Vice President, Ambu A. It affects my ability. Why do we see that only in the physical manifestation of a fever or a cold or a cough? But it could also be how we feel about ourselves, how we feel, what is happening is there's a stress pandemic which we have, and those factors come from work and also come from personal life. We put more and more, how do you say, expectations on ourselves. So So why is it that we see a medical situation translating into a work situation, but a mental situation could also transfer into work situation, even though it originates from home, or on the other side, originates at work and goes to home?
Yeah, and I think that that kind of it's clear that you've got really good self-awareness and an understanding of how you feel, you know, how that might affect you. And where did that come from? So if we go back to like when you're at, I don't know, school, college, university, were you always sort of two questions, were you always self-aware? And then secondly, did you think that you would go into the medical world and then end up in pharma?
So I think if I were to give you a little bit of where I started, I was born in New Delhi, India, and I went to a very atypical school, if you want to talk about it. It was called Springdale School, and in a very meritocratic society that India was when I started school in late 80s and early 90s, that school did not have exams. We were not tested on anything. You were told you have to just learn. You have to learn to learn. And I'm, the equivalent of the UK and in the US when you have exams, when you have your GSC exams and things. The first thing we had to learn as early teenagers was to sit through an exam for 3 hours, not about the content, but we did not know how to sit down 3 hours and write an exam. But that gave us very different experiences. We had the motto in that time for the school was the world is a family. We were exposed in the late 80s and 90s. India was all about maybe a lot of Indian icons of Mahatma Gandhi, Nehru. We've talked a lot about it, but we were also exposed to the Nelson Mandelas of the world, the Che Guevaras of the world. We were exposed to Dalai Lama. We had a very well-rounded way of looking at the world. And I think that has given a very empathetic view on the world. This school exposed me to work on projects where we provided support for end of life cancer patients who didn't have anybody else to talk to them. So we would go and read books to them sometimes.
Yeah.
And, we were told you have to go and talk, teach the alphabet in leprosy colonies. Go and sit with these people who have been ostracized from the society. Learn to sit with them. Learn to understand what their lives are. And then work with teenagers with psychological problems. Go and support the staff that is working with them. And then also work on tiger conservation, because that is also fun to work with. So these were some of the exposures I had. And I think I knew since I was 5 years old that I wanted to be in the medical field. Now, I did not know where I would end up and how I would end up to be a dental surgeon, but I always knew that I was going to be in a place where I've got to help people. And the joke is that my dad would say that he has this mental image of me where I would make my brother lie down and say, "You're having a heart attack and I'm going to save you."
So I've often I've often asked this question, and some people say, "I've got no idea. I went to university and I ended up in this career." With you, this is like predetermined. This is definitely you had to get something to do with the medical or pharma industry. It was in your blood.
It was always the way for me. I think that's what I realized. I wanted to drive impact. When I was exposed to all these projects, I was more I love animals. So one of the things was, if I want to do medical, maybe I could do a veterinarian. That was the only, I would say, plan B I kind of thought through. Not nothing more than that. But driving impact was also something that was very close to my heart. Driving impact as a medical professional or dental professional. People always say a dentist is a very easy thing to say. I would say that when you smile, it's a big part of your psyche.
Yeah.
It's not just about the pain you feel when you have a toothache. When you're in a situation, how you appear is such a big part. So there's a psychological element of helping people as well. So I kind of started to see that as I started my dental education as well. And yeah, there have been various influences and some moments that I've had which have just shaped me and say, this is who I am and this is where I want to go.
I mean, Springdale has done a fantastic job. What a great like proactive exposure. If you kind of look at some of the other education systems, I mean, it seems like you were given and you've obviously taken some pretty cool opportunities from an early age. So, what a great foundation for you. Then it starts to feel a bit different. You then start to get, a track on what you want to do and how you want to do it. What happened from like university to then relocating and moving abroad? Can you just give us a bit of an insight into how that catalyst worked for you from a career standpoint?
Yeah, if I can tell you, there were a few moments in my own life that kind of shaped some of these, really cemented where I wanted to go. Um, One of the things was, um, I'll talk about if you want to, we can talk about my dad as well. But when we think about what shaped my career, I was working as a dental surgeon, and in my early 20s, I was training up to do maxillofacial surgery, wanted to specialize in it. And the thing is, when you're working in the emergency room, you see humanity at its best and at its worst in the same millisecond. And that is something that stays with you and says, I am working to help people. And some of these crises that they go through, accidents, violence, abuse, you come face to face with it. And then you realize I have the ability in that millisecond, me and my peers have the ability to elevate this. And then you have seen the bottom of the pit, you're constantly hopeful. And then something that happened with me personally was I was on the receiving end of this accident. And that halted my surgical career. And I wanted to say, okay, I have this strong desire to help people. I have this strong desire to make sure that I am constantly driving impact with people, making sure that, you know, the world is a healthier place than
And you left it.
without
Yeah.
me in it. Then, and I want to leave it that way. So then I started thinking, I can't use my hands anymore, but I still have my brain. And that's where I started educating myself within clinical research and then moved to Singapore, did a course which was half given in Singapore and half in Medical University of South Carolina. And that started my journey in the pharmaceutical world and then eventually medical devices and back and forth with it.
Yeah. Wow. So all of a sudden you were leaving India
Yeah.
and looking at what you wanted to kind of, from an ambition standpoint, what you wanted to go and do was make an impact, leave the world better than you started it. When did you first feel like a leader, I suppose? When did this moment kick off for you?
Um, I would say that when I was working in the ER or working in the outpatient delivery, sometimes I was given this opportunity that I was allowed to lead the multi-speciality, sort of the triage part of it. And that meant that I had to lead people who were senior than me. I had to lead people who had different disciplines than me. And I had to make sure that we were all working towards patient X getting the care that they needed in the desired amount of time. And I think that's where I really felt like a leader, even though I didn't have the title. That was something where I was more driven by purpose of getting the job done, and then how do you orchestrate this this beautiful orchestra? Everybody plays into the same music, and the patient gets the care that they need. So that was one of the first moments where I felt like a leader, that I'm actually moving five people in the same direction to get to the right outcome.
Yep. And then when we met last, you and I were discussing your entry into the corporate life. And it was different to most because you actually took leadership yourself and you were knocking on a few doors to try and get in. Can you just give the listeners a little bit of, I suppose, open the door into how you got into the industry and the work that you had to put in?
So yeah, I was still working, studying with my clinical research background, and finishing up the studies. And I actually was at a networking event. And at that networking event, this gentleman walked in and he started talking a lot about clinical trials. And this was sort of a networking event for the students to get to know what are the different parts of an organization in a pharma and a medtech universe. This was in Singapore. And I just remember walking up to him and saying, I would love to have an opportunity to work for you. And and that is something, again, you have to know that, the way I see it is always, what am I going to lose at the end of this? If my game is zero, then what's the risk in this? So the risk was that I would never get a job. And the upside was that I might get a connection, I might get a conversation going, and that is exactly what happened. But I did get a job. This gentleman was working in MSD at that time, in Singapore. I didn't get that as a job, but he had a nonprofit organization which did, he said, I need somebody who can just do website updates. And I kid you not, I got my first job in a nonprofit, but it was very much linked to the pharmaceutical industry. It was a lot about pharmaceutical training. And I got my first job updating websites, updating pictures for 20 Singapore dollars an hour. And I was so proud because that led to an actual internship and a graduate internship with MSD. And that led to me becoming a lead project manager pretty fast. And that led to me being in the pharma industry and officially arriving in Singapore.
Yeah, it's fantastic because it's not your normal pathway to corporate life, but it shows, I think, that that early resilience, but also creating and taking opportunities. Not everybody has the gumption or the ambition to just go and ask the question and see what happens.
Yeah, I think we as people are always so concerned about how are we going to appear to that person if we say this. And sometimes, and I think it's a series of actually going down and then coming back up again to say, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that having that just ability to go, let's go, let's see what the opportunity is. But it's quite interesting because from that moment, you and I have spoken about this before, but you were creating a career with the CEO target in mind early. And
Yes.
some people accidentally get there. They just keep plowing forwards and then it's like, okay, now I've got the big role. But what changed? When did you start building your career backwards, I suppose? When did you go, right, that's what I want to do. I now need to get all these puzzle pieces correct?
Yes. So this happened to me, first of all, the first few years, the formative years in pharma, I was trying to figure out what are the different departments. I'd started in R&D, I'd started in clinical operations. Then I came to Denmark. I started working in pharmacovigilance, drug safety. Lovely people there. And I met this lady who was maybe 10 years ahead of me in her career. And she was the one who said to me, Aditi, where do you want to go? And I said, the only way if I'll ever be satisfied is if I was running my own company. I would want to be the CEO. She's like, okay, that's great. It's good that you voice it out. How are you going to get there? I'm like, I'm going to be very specialized and, taking this linear path up. And she said, but the area you're working in, go back and look historically how many people have made it to the C-suite with the specialization you're currently working in. And that was a aha moment. We had this conversation. And she said to me, and I still remember the words very clearly. She said, the world belongs to the connector and to the generalist. You need to know, you need to have enough depth to be able to talk to people. You don't need to know everything about everything. Again, going back to that learning agility, and saying you need to be able to have the conversation with the specialist, but you have to be able to connect that information with the next specialist. And for that, you have to intentionally build your career over time, working across the value chain, so that you are the most, the most valuable employee, but also the most credible candidate when it comes to the executive role. So that's something that I got about. That clarity came about in the year of the Lord, I would say 2013, 2014. And that propelled me to go have development conversations with the manager and say, I'm going to work in this area for 2.5 years. I'm going to learn all I can. And then I want to move to this. So I already knew where I wanted to go next.
And how did you stay grounded in that like long-term vision while you're also trying to manage the immediate workload, the leadership issues and challenges that you might have?
I think it's about knowing where you want to go. It's that long, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? And then I recently started running. So I always say, okay, I'm going to think about the first 5K that I'm going to run. Like that, I know I'm going to be exhausted. But then when I reach the 4.5, I'm like, okay, we've kind of thought about today, Addie, you and I, we've thought about, like, I'm talking to myself, we're going to do a 10K. So we're at the halfway now. Come on, bring it out. So it's always having that clarity in saying, this is where I want to go. But in order to get there, I have to perform here and now. And if I don't perform here and now, if I cannot add value to the business here and now, there is no way I'm going to be able to unlock that next step. So it's great. And that's the other part. You have to be able to connect every role to what it is going to bring you in that grand scheme of things you have. But it's not going to come without you being able to show that I actually bring significant value to the business here and now as well, because that'll unlock your stakeholders, that'll unlock your peers talking highly of what you have achieved. And when you get into that, you get the next chance. And, having those allies who will give you that next chance.
Yeah, love it. That saying though, the world belongs to the connector and the generalist, is a great way to put it. How do you connect? What's your magic formula for being able to engage the different stakeholders and team members?
What I cannot say if there's a magic formula for me. What I have gotten a lot of feedback on is that when somebody is talking to me from a technical perspective, I can talk to them and say, so tell me, how will this benefit our customers? So tell me, when you're talking about this regulatory timeline, in the pharma world or in the medtech world, I always end up asking, so how fast will we be able to get this innovation to our customers? What would it mean to the business? So I start unraveling it in a questioning way and say, so tell me, I don't need to know all the details of a submission. I just need to know, unearth for me what will drive the impact. And I think when you start having that conversation with a very specialized function or a specialized person, they also, in a way of reflecting, start thinking, oh, this is important. This is what I don't need to talk about 10 different things. I need to talk about these 3 things. And I need to focus on these 3 things to move the business forward. And then the conversation would be very different with a medical specialist. The conversation would be very different with an operations specialist. But you need to start saying, you know what, in order for us to move forward, I don't need you to tell me about the 10 things. Let's talk about the 3 things that will make the business move forward. And that is, that has always been something that I have gotten feedback on, that I can have some critical questions. Sometimes I can also be, I'm not perfect, I can be direct. But it's always also about what are the things that will drive the business forward? What are the decision points we need to take here, which will drive the business forward? And for that, again, you have to be having such strategic clarity that you're able to ask those questions. You're able to also convert that strategic clarity into something simple that a person in a very specialized function understands.
And if you have good enough questions and you're curious, your curiosity is about driving impact. It's a really nice, well, that is the formula. So
Yeah.
it's a really nice way of putting it, but you instantly in your mind went to questions. My other question for you, I suppose, is you've spoken about R&D, clean ops, PV, drug safety. When did, I don't know, a more commercial or entrepreneurial spirit start to evolve? Because you need that in your journey to effectively wanting to be a CEO at some point.
Yeah, so that started when I became I moved from medical affairs into a full-blown commercial role. So that started as an individual contributor before. And this is where, so my journey of like looking at the value chain is I wanted to get closer and closer and closer to the customer, closer and closer to the people who actually will prescribe your product, closer and closer to understand what is driving their behavior, what is driving their preference. And yes, I am, without disrespect, clinical operations, regulatory, yes, they are so critical to do that. But we can also teach them and say, hey, this is what the medical professional or this is what the user really, really wants. And that's the commercial job as well, to be able to translate all that they say into something simple and say, this is the endpoint that will move the needle. This is the clinical endpoint that will move the needle. Or this is that amazing user experience we need this medical device to deliver in order for us to be able to drive preference in the field. So that happened. And then that happened about, I would say, more than 10 years ago. So I kind of accelerated into some of the value chain. And then when I ended up in commercial, I was like, okay, I'm home.
Yeah.
And sort of that has always been the case. And I knew that this is here. I also need to understand different things. I should be able to sell a single product. I should be able to develop how we will sell a particular product. All right, then how do I sell a portfolio? How do I make sure that we do tactics that are 0 to 2 years versus making trade-offs on a strategic level that are 5 to 10 years long? So there is a lot to unpack within commercial as well, which is also a journey that I'm on right now.
Yeah, and then all journeys for a CEO have their ups and downs, right? If that's where you're planning on going, it's not always going to be top marks in every moment of your career and schooling and stuff like that. But the other thing that we mentioned quickly there was your entrepreneurial journey. Okay, so can we have a discussion about, and for the listeners, there's going to be a bit of professional grief going on here because Aditi, you started your own business at the same time as growing your corporate career. Can we
Yes.
have an understanding of what you learned about yourself from starting and then ultimately having to close your own venture? What did that do for your career and your resilience?
I think it was one of the most difficult things I've done so far. Apart from, I would say, putting my beloved dog to sleep,
Yeah.
which is always a difficult human experience, this one comes a close second. And because it started with an actual customer need. I was diagnosed with severe acne, and I was put on oral retinoids. And the side effect of oral retinoids is it makes your skin very dry. It has a lot of side effects. And as a consequence, and I was sitting at a Christmas dinner and I started laughing and I got a deep cut in my lip and it started bleeding actively in front of a lot of people. And I was like, that's it. There's got to be a better way.
Yeah.
There's got to be a better way. And that sort of got me into natural skincare, completely carb B. And that's what I started with. And the idea was personalized skincare as a subscription. A very interesting idea, very ahead of its time. Did not know that FMCG moved even faster. So when we started formulating, we wanted to, I had a friend who was working with me at that time, And she's a pharmacist, so she could do a lot of the formulation. And we said, we got to make something that's super clean and super natural and super personalized. Great concept. Started doing it for 25 people, and then ended up closing it because when we looked at going on the scale up route, there was no way the concept was going to stand from an operational standpoint. Imagine if you have from 25 people to 100 people in a formulating pharmacy. Are you going to make 100 creams? What your SKUs are going to look like? What is your profitability going to look like? So it was a period where I ended up thinking very, very hard about the business. The idea is very great. The idea is very novel. And now I know that it's not novel anymore because a lot of companies do offer personalized skincare. At the same time, it was my ticket out of the corporate world. My idea was, if I work on this and if this becomes good and if I get investors, I am going to be in a super luxurious condition where I'm going to be the CEO. I'll have a shortcut. This is my aim. And then I'm also going to be working in skincare, in dermatology, which has become my love. And then I would also be able to just help people. Like, all of it was combined. And then from one day to the next, it was not one day to the next, a few months, I realized I cannot make this happen.
Mm.
And I can tell you that it broke me because I suddenly had this feeling that, you feel like a fool. You feel like you've spent so much time and you spend so much energy and you spend so much, evenings, like, thinking about this is going to happen. And in 2 years from now or 3 years from now, I'd have my own little company. I'll employ people, I'll do all of this. You have all these hopes and dreams and you're just like, not going to happen. And you are the one, there's nobody else delivering that news to you. You are coming to that realization yourself. There is no boss. There is no employee. There is no doctor telling you, sorry, this is the time of death.
Yeah.
It's you yourself.
And you said that you kind of sat with that professional grief and really took it, thought about it deeply. How did you come out the other side?
I would say that I started looking, it's all about perspective. I started looking at all that had gone, and on a personal side, I ended up parting ways with that friend as well because she was not agreeing to the decision I was coming at. So this was a lot. It's not just personal. Again, I said the person and the professional is just one human being at the end of it.
Yeah.
So I had to sit down and start looking at that differently. I said, what have you learned in this process? You have learned that the context of customers changes very, very fast. You have learned that you have to have end-to-end thinking about your projects and your products and your portfolio. You have learned how to build a brand digitally. You never knew how to do that. And you did that by doing, not by some course or somebody doing it for you. You hands-on went in, secured a domain name, secured everything, went in to look at what the campaign colors should look like. Nobody was doing it for you. You did it yourself. And so the learning curve you've had in 5 years is so vastly richer than anyone else. And what that gives you is a secret weapon that you can actually see end to end. And the next time you'll make a better judgment before you see something too late. And I think it took me a lot of conversations with some of my close friends as well. And they were trying to tell me, so you also have to rely on that network. This is not an island conversation. Yeah. This is not a conversation you have. So one of the things that I would say is I was also very lucky that I had network of people around me. So I'm trusted. You don't need 10, you need 2 maybe, who can really sit with you in that dark place and say, hey, but you learned something. And sometimes you get coached out by being knocked on the head and said, get out of it now. I mean, start looking at it differently. So exactly. So that professional grief and that personal grief of losing that friend, um, I sat with it. I started changing my perspective about it. And I started actually finding the strength in what I had achieved
Yeah.
by failing.
Yeah. And because most people don't even ever try it.
No, no. And the strength is I found an idea. I knew that what I was betting on, and I went for it. To your
Yeah.
point, a lot of people don't.
A lot of people don't. And yeah, kudos to you. I've been there, done it myself. And I think that, if you have those trusted people around you, you also then become a trusted voice for somebody else. When somebody else is going through those similar struggles, you can kind of hold your hand up and say, hey, look, when I did it, this is what happened. You might learn something from me too. So absolute kudos for giving it a go, but then also for getting back up off the canvas and reigniting that corporate career again.
Yes, yes. So there was a deliberate decision when I was in that phase that I would not take up very big leadership projects or leadership responsibilities because I was wanting to pivot
Yep.
into the startup. I had all the leadership coaching. I had been given a couple of options to become a leader. I was doing, more of graduate leadership, young people leadership, with the intent that I knew that if I were to go into a startup, chances are that I'll have a lot of young people working with me, a lot of digital gurus working. So I had a lot of projects that were focusing a lot on digital marketing. So I was a little bit like, I need to be able to balance where I can take what I learn at work, put it into the startup, and vice versa. So that was really nice. And then reigniting my career, then I was like, okay, this was one venture, tried it, and now we're going to put 100% effort to what gives you 100% joy, which is also bringing impact, but in the corporate life. And that's where I started seriously looking at my leadership journey, going back into that long term. Again, the long term never changed. I just thought that I could short circuit it with the startup.
Yeah. But it's interesting because it sharpened your view, sharpened your focus. So then when you're in this corporate world again, and then you get back into flow state, you start leading and start, that ambition again. Your leadership philosophy centers on aligning ambition, okay, with systems that scale. Can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit more about the three Ps for you and how you actually have been able to get back in and start to really push the needle again?
Yes. So I wish I could take the credit for 3P as an acronym. I can't. It comes from, but I have changed the P's. So typically, when I started earlier in my leadership or earlier in my, matrix leadership, which I did have a lot of roles before I actually got true leadership, as in line leadership. The 3P stood for uh, people, performance, and process.
Yep.
Right? And do we have the right people at the right competence level? Are we looking at performance in the right way? Do we have the right measures, and do we have the right processes and tools to look at how do we make this successful? When I started working a little bit with it and I started being a senior leader and I got that, I said, it's not about the process. It's definitely not about, performance first. It's actually about, have we clarified the purpose?
Yeah.
Then you get the people, and the multiplication of it will give you the performance. So for me, when I look at it at scale, whether it is down to a single project to an entire enterprise, I always say, why are we doing it? For whom are we doing it? Are we all aligned? Are our noses pointed in the same direction? Do we understand the purpose in general? And when I say purpose, it's also the strategy.
Yep.
And then I look at, where are my people at? What is it that I need to build? how do I support them? Depending on individual teams, they're also in different journeys. They could be, when the sigmoid curve of whether they are low performing, going to high performing, norming, storming, forming, you have all these stages. Where are they? And on top of it, do they have the enough energy in them? Do they understand? Sometimes we talk a lot about competence. We don't talk about energy. When you've got a team that doesn't have this hunger or this desire, they can be the most competent people in the room. They'll still fall short of the purpose you want to achieve. I really look for hunger. I really look for this desire, this wish to be the best, or the wish to achieve this. So that's also part of that people piece.
Yeah.
And then performance. Performance is not about oh, let's whip and get to that sales number. Performance it has to be broken out a little bit and said, have I been clear as a leader of what I demand of them? And in my book, Clear is Kind, it is not about, oh, you need to do this. It's about being very clear. How are you going to achieve that purpose? The strategy to execution piece.
Yep.
And then, do I measure them adequately? Do I give them feedback for improvement? It is not about whipping them into a racehorse. It's about enabling that performance. So that to me is my 3P. I really spend a lot of time thinking and simplifying. What are the 2-3 things we need to do in order to achieve this P&L that I'm being asked? And who else is after this, ball? What is the competition like? What do my customers want? What is the competition like? What are the 2-3 things I could do to move the needle? Do I have the right people? And are they performing at their best? And if not, why? How can I help them?
Yeah. And then you've been able to link that back to the purpose.
Yes.
So it's a really nice, it's not as if you're taking process completely out, but actually the process can be worked on if you've got the right people with the right feeling, with the right purpose, right energy, with the wish to achieve, then they should also be able to work it out themselves with some guiding.
Yeah. And nobody is, I think people are at different learning journeys. There are people at different levels. That's why you want to have a diverse team, but they all bring different experiences, and we have to respect and honor that. And when you start creating that safe environment for people, that safe team culture, and you've been very clear, actually, we're going to be building this rocket ship to the moon, and you're the guy who's mopping the floor. But you're on the team that's building that rocket ship to the moon. Just remember that.
Yeah.
But you're still mopping the floor, and I want the floor to be very clean because, we need this for this way. So, but they need to feel part of being the team that is building the rocket ship to the moon, even though they're doing a very, very small specialized part.
Yeah. Now let's talk about intentional leadership. Okay, because you've spoken about it earlier with your kind of internal curiosity, which has been a theme throughout this discussion, but also you've been able to lead a lot of cultural changes through coaching. Okay.
Yes.
So how do you create those environments, those ones where you're able to coach, you're able to be clear as kind, where people feel seen, feel safe, and ultimately stretched? What's your leadership kind of thesis for this?
For me, it's very simple, Tom. It's about creating. It's very, very basic. It's something that I love. I love a anecdote which I read in in *Sapiens*, Yuval Noah Harari.
Yep.
The currency that human beings trade in is trust. And if you fail in that currency, you can forget about the rest of the things. And I still remember that line when I read, he said, you trust that when you push the switch, the light bulb has to come on. You trust that when you switch on the ignition, the car will start. So that's the currency of trust. And I think that's such a fundamental piece of building that culture, going through the transition, is that you're safe here. I trust you fully because I believe in you. You can do this job. And I know that there may be things where you need to be better at because, you need a little bit of training or you need a little bit of guidance on this, but I trust you wholeheartedly. And the way to get trust is to give it first.
Yep.
So my principle is build a trusting environment, because that brings safety automatically. That brings that the team will come and scream and yell at you when things are off, and then they'll be like, we can scream and yell or tell what truly is on our mind, because then we'll find a solution together.
But it's all built on trust.
Yes.
I absolutely love it. And I think that sadly, that is one of the things that is missing from us. Well, obviously from a psychologically safe environment, but it's being able to look back, at your learning resilience and humility as your active ingredients. I think that is wedded in trusting that people can do the right thing and giving them the space to do it and to perform in the world that you're creating.
Yes, I have been very blessed in some with the leaders I've had so far, and I can also say that they have trusted me to be able to deliver things which have been maybe a little bit difficult, maybe a little bit out of the blue. They have trusted what I bring to the table, and they have also offered trust and said, this is something that you do not know, but here's how we're going to help you learn this. And I think I've imbibed that and taken that forward, and want to pay it forward as a leader. Is That's how you grow that community, because then you inspire somebody else who would come into their leadership role at some point and say, I enjoyed that, I'm going to implement the same here. And that's how you keep growing the positivity.
Yeah. And I think this will bring me on nicely to my next question, actually. So I always like to wrap up the podcast with a couple of questions. Let's take what you were just saying there and talk about the future of leadership. What are you excited about, or what's in your mind when it comes to the future of leadership and how it might change?
For me, I think what I'm excited about is something that you started off talking about, Tom, that 10 years ago, the active ingredients of leadership were very, very different. And what I'm excited about is the context in which these active ingredients are changing. And some of the attributes that were considered really soft are actually becoming some of the most strongest things that a leader needs. It's no longer about being the loudest one in the room. I mean, I have the energy and I can be the loudest one in the room. But it is, as a leader, if I want to succeed, I need to learn to keep quiet and listen. That is what is exciting me, because that is, for me, is the learning agility that I need to have. So all these attributes of humility, which we didn't talk about. We didn't talk about servant leadership. That's becoming very, very active and much spoken about, and will become more, where you have to cater to different cultures, you have to cater to different generational cultures. And that excites me, because that is sort of a tension and an exercise a leader constantly will have to play themselves in and deliver results, because the market is also becoming very interesting and competitive.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that as you said, the active ingredients of 10 years ago seem to be not out of date entirely, but very much under change. It's quite radical. And then if we look at the three that you spoke about at the beginning of the episode, I said that they were very much forward thinking active ingredients. So yeah, harness those. I think that there's a really exciting future of leadership to come. What about life sciences? What about the future of life sciences?
Life sciences, very interesting, very, very interesting place to be. I will take pharma and then I'll take medtech.
Yep.
But the overarching theme is that if you look at what GLP-1 has done, everybody's talking about GLP-1. What they have done is put such a big consumer lens on the life sciences industry. If you take yourself out of the Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk debate, zoom up. What have they really done? They have said, do you understand your customer? And if you understand your customer, are you able to supply them with the product right in time? If you want to stay relevant, you have to understand your customer and your competition and obsess over it. If you can't obsess over those two and come up with that blue ocean where you need to be, rest assured, your relevance will be questioned. That's number one on the consumer side and everything. The other part, there's a technology lens, artificial intelligence, and I know everybody talks about it. But looking across the performance, not the people, not the purpose, actually people also. How is artificial intelligence going to change the way we work in our industry? How is artificial intelligence going to change the way we look at performance? Sometimes you have to understand that the doctor or the healthcare provider or the user or the patient is suddenly, again, it's just one human being. They may be using Facebook, they may be using other social media, they may be coming in touch with better chat GPTs. You cannot stay relevant as pharmaceutical and medtech industry without incorporating it. If I'm sitting on my personal computer and I have a chat GPT bot that I have been able to program myself to do, automation, and then I go to my work computer, which does not allow, it's not going to work anymore.
Yeah.
So that's number two. And number three is with AI, with the advent, this metabolic revolution we're going through, the personalized care is going to be more and more in focus in our industry. And we may talk about immunology, I can talk about dermatology, but all of it is connected. So yes, the genetics was the decade before. Now I'm talking about how does AI bring us faster? How does immunology make drugs become more specific? And for the medtech industry, how do we capitalize on that wave?
Yeah. And I think that the customer centricity through all of that as well for the future is absolutely key to what you're saying. The personalized care, getting closer to customers, but also in the middle of that, driving that change could be AI.
Yes.
What an exciting time. And I must say, it's been an absolute pleasure, Aditi. I've really enjoyed all of the build up to this because obviously we've met a few times. You know a few of the team here. You're also going to be on one of our Lift Up broadcasts soon, and it has been an absolute pleasure. Kudos to you for everything that you've done, and I really do hope that CEO title isn't too far away for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And it was an absolute pleasure to be here.
Greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.